Welcome to the Optimal Life Podcast. My name is Elliot Barnett, and I'm excited for you to be here with me today to learn to help others or help yourself live an optimal life. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a very important topic, the challenge of change. Why is it that even when people really want to make changes in their lives, they struggle to do so? I actually answered this question in the previous episode, just didn't really call it out directly. If you haven't listened to that episode, I'd really encourage you to go listen to it, the unconscious mind and the science behind the unconscious. And the reason that answered the question is that, of course, the answer is what's working behind the scenes. What is driving us in our lives is the reason why we struggle to make the changes that we want to make in our lives. So it stands to reason that the unconscious, which is really most of our experience, what drives our behaviors and how we show up in our life, would be responsible for this challenge. I really encourage mental health professionals and coaches that I train to address this very early on in their journeys with their clients. The earlier that this is called out, the better. Why is that? Because this is a universal problem. Everybody, no matter how excited they are, no matter how excited they seem to be about making the changes, no matter how engaged they seem to be in the therapeutic journey or the coaching journey, they're going to face this challenge sooner or later. And if it's called out early on by the coach or the therapist, and it's really put right out on the table, when the client faces it, which is inevitable, they'll say, oh, this is what we already talked about. I get this. I know what to do now. So I really encourage, and this is why actually I build it right into cognitive response therapy and the RATE framework. So the certifications over at elliottbarnett.com, I have an entire module that with exercises and role play and everything to make sure that this is very, very clear. Because if you've ever experienced a client disappearing on you, one of the reasons, this could actually be one of the reasons. In fact, coaches I've talked to recently said exactly that. They, as I explained to them some of the science behind the unconscious, they said, "Gosh, this is probably why they ghosted me." I said, "Exactly. This is a lot of times they run away from the very change that they want to make." So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to go into detail about that challenge. And the why and some of the things that we can do about it, because this is not just about explaining the why behind it, but we want to make sure that the actions are clear. So whether you're a mental health professional, a coach, or just an individual that wants to make change in your life, this will definitely help. So again, we kind of covered this. So what did we cover in the last episode? Let's touch a little bit about that and why and how that maps into this challenge. The role of the unconscious. Okay, so I said this is, the unconscious, as I said in the last episode, is the vast majority of our human experience. When I say the unconscious, there's popular terms like the subconscious mind. It's really synonymous. There is another term called implicit cognition that you read in research and literature, and that really refers to any of the processes or things that are going on below the person's conscious awareness. Give the example of the fact that we don't see with our eyes, smell with our nose, or see with our eyes. These are just collection devices. They serve all that data, all that information up to our mind for it to interpret. That's implicit cognition in action. It's just serving up the tip of the iceberg, what it thinks you need to know in order to survive your next moment. Not thrive, but to survive. So that's implicit cognition in action. It's everything that's below, the processing that's below what you're consciously aware of and what serves up to your conscious awareness a bunch of information. Why is that important? Well, the role of the unconscious is to move you away from threat and towards safety. It is not about thriving. It's not about future planning. It's not about improving your life. That's opportunity. Opportunity always comes second to survival. This cannot be overstated. Opportunity always comes second to survival. So when you face a challenge, when you face something new, when you face something that naturally evokes a stress response of the body, this is a threat, a perceived threat to what? Homeostasis. So what's homeostasis? There's a great concept that I love to talk about, and I do cover this in the certification. It's a concept called the body budget. The body budget, you can kind of think of it like a financial budget. If you have money in your bank, hopefully you do, if you start taking money out, there should be a really good reason why you're taking money out. And you're going to be conscious of as your balance goes down, especially if it gets close to zero. And you certainly want to avoid it going negative. That's the concept of the body budget. Your body likes to be in a nice, even, energetic state. And that's what we refer to as homeostasis, a nice balanced state. As you take action, face challenges, do anything that's thought-provoking, anything physical, anything that's demanding to your body, it naturally takes withdrawals from your body budget. Now, an obvious example is you get hungry, you get something to eat. If you get tired, you take a nap, right? So that's, of course, your system. You're saying, hey, we're really out of homeostasis here. We need you to replenish your energy and restore balance. We need to get back to homeostasis. But this is really informative when we talk about facing challenges or wanting to make changes in our lives. When we face something new and unfamiliar, there's a natural withdrawal from our body budgets, knocking us out of homeostasis. Now, what is your unconscious going to do about that? It's going to try and get you to move away from that threat to your homeostatic state of the body, because it's pulling that energy away. It's going to say, hey, we need to get back to homeostasis. I want you to start slowing down. I need you to pull back from that. I need you to get away from this perceived threat and back to something that's more familiar or energetically even. Now, this, of course, plays into what we talked about last time, which is the predictive model of the brain. Now, I'm going to do a whole episode on that research, predictive coding, and so on, but just to touch on it here, a prediction plays directly into this. A prediction is implicit cognition, making a guess. It's saying, what do I think this person needs to know next, and what type of energy do I need to give this person to survive their next moment? Not thrive, but to survive. So what type of energy do I need to give, and what information do I need to give? It's a guess. The challenge becomes the predictions, the unconscious mind, implicit cognition specifically, wants to be right. Why? Well, if the prediction is right, that's energetically easier. We know this. When we go into a familiar situation, we feel at ease. If we're rereading something we already kind of understand, or we're listening to something that's familiar to us and we understand what they're saying, it's easy for us. It's energetically easy. We can pretty much stay in homeostasis. Our body budgets don't get depleted. But if we are engaged in something that's really hard for us to understand, we're going to an unfamiliar situation, we're listening to something that's challenging to us, that will take withdrawals from our body budget. Why? Well, the predictions are wrong. The predictions that the mind is generating, the predictions are generated based on environmental information and state of the body, but the key part of that is memories. Memories are part of the prediction. So if you don't have context, if you don't have a relevant memory, the prediction that's generated is probably going to be off, which is an energetic suck from the body budget. It's withdrawing from the body budget and saying, and then the unconscious mind goes, we're starting to get out of homeostasis. That's why when we go to unfamiliar situations, when we go to something that's challenging for us, we feel that internal resistance. That stress response of the body is implicit cognition giving us an energetic response to pull us away from that threat. Obviously, when we are completely surprised, that's an adrenaline rush, right? So we get somebody jumps up from the corner and we run away. We're not even consciously aware of why we're running. We're just running. So that's something that's our unconscious mind is doing on our behalf. But when we are consciously aware of these decisions, we're saying to ourselves, do I want to engage in that project? Do I want to go to this party that I'm not familiar, I don't know the people there? These are conscious decisions, and we feel this internal resistance show up. That's implicit cognition giving us a signal that we are starting to take withdrawals from our body budget, and it wants us to get back to from something that's familiar. This is why when people talk about the comfort zone, I don't like that term as much as I like the familiar zone. Because it's not as comfortable, is it? It's not really your comfort zone, but it is certainly familiar. You can be in very uncomfortable situations, objectively uncomfortable. But as far as the homeostasis of your body budget is concerned, it's familiar to you, so you just stay in that situation. We know that as far as relationships go. People don't change relationships very easily. Why? Well, because it's familiar to them. They stay in their familiar zone, even if it's not good for them. We say to our clients, we say, hey, you want to change, you want to evolve, you want to make those changes towards living an optimal life. And they say, no, I'm good. You say, well, no, you're not. It's not that they're comfortable. It's that they're in their familiar zone. This is the challenge of change. The challenge of change is that we are fighting against the instincts that have evolved into us over the evolution of our species. We are the survivors of those that got up from the campfire and ran away from the rustle in the bushes, not those that went to seek to understand what was really going on. We are the descendants of those that hunkered down mostly and stayed safe first and only sought opportunity to go outside of the boundaries of what they understood to be their maybe tribal boundaries, only when it was safe to do so. So seeking opportunity always came from our ancestors after survival. But this instinct still lives within us. So when you say to your clients, hey, don't you want to live a better life? Or you as an individual say, hey, I want to engage in this therapeutic journey, or I want to make changes or live a better life. That is the fight, the internal resistance, that fight within us that we're fighting against. It's not that you are consciously choosing to resist the change. It is your unconscious working on what it thinks is what's best for you. So we have to really appreciate and be compassionate for ourselves. We have to appreciate that we are fighting against a well-established instinct that lives within all of us. All of us have this. Some of us have just learned how to lean into that resistance and push past it. I always tell people, your limits are beyond where you have defined them to be. Your limits are beyond where you have defined them to be. And you don't know where they are until you push up against the resistance and push past it. I love moving that line for people. I show them where they think their line is, and I show them how to move past it. And then the line moves and they say, okay, now here's my line where my limit is. Well, no, let's push past that one. Let's keep pushing past those limits. At some point, you start running through them, but at the beginning of the journey with a client, you have to help them to find those lines and feel mindfully lean up against those and learn how to push past that resistance. This is what exposure therapy is all about, by the way. When people have a phobia or maybe they have social anxiety, there's different strategies and tactics to lean up against that resistance and move past it. There's great techniques of, let's say you have social anxiety, you don't put something in place that you don't control, you put something in place that you can control. You don't say something like, well, I'll go to the party only if so-and-so treats me well. Well, you don't control how they treat you. You can say, I will go to the party as long as there's less than 10 people. I'll go to the party and be willing to accept how I feel about this for 10 minutes. Well, that 10 minutes is up. Hey, you can leave if you want, but you're going to give yourself that 10 minutes. And then that line might move to 15 to 20 minutes and so on. Maybe it goes from 10 people to 20 people. So this is the things that you have actual control over. If you start to teach and train your unconscious that the line that you thought was there, that's not really the line. That's not really your limit. This is the whole point of cognitive response therapy, is to influence and train the unconscious to start giving you better, energetic, more proportionate energy and better information. That's the whole goal of cognitive response therapy that's built into the RATE framework. is to help you to learn how to train the unconscious to generate appropriate energy and more empowering information. And when I say appropriate energy, a lot of times we are getting overwhelmed and swept away by the energetic responses of our body. And we're being shown disempowering or not helpful information that shows up as a form of thought. If you have social anxiety, there's not an actual true threat to your safety by going to the party. Your unconscious just gives you an overwhelming amount of stress chemicals in the body and disempowering information about and the narratives that show up about that party. It's not really an actual threat. So the more that we recognize that it is okay that we can adjust the body budget to accommodate, it's like we expand our financial budget to be able to accommodate all sorts of great purchases and great ways of living our life. That's what we want to do. Same thing with our body budget or our physical body budgets. We want to make sure that we keep teaching and training our unconscious that just because we feel that resistance does not mean that we buy into it. Just because certain information shows up does not mean we have to be swept away by it or buy into that negative information. Whatever shows up from implicit cognition through the prediction, it's just energy and information. That's it. And we talked a little bit about this, the difference between feelings and emotions. Feelings and sensations of the body, it's just the chemicals like cortisol or norepinephrine or adrenaline or all these different chemicals that show up. Those are just chemical releases of the body. Emotions are how we label those sensations of the body. That's where we get to choose. So we could say, oh my gosh, I'm scared, I'm fearful, I'm stressed out. All these words that we use are labels of the sensations of the body. We can say, I'm excited, I can't wait. We lean into that a little bit and we push past it. So when we want to engage in change in our lives, these types of narratives and the labels that we use to the energetic responses of our bodies and the narratives that show up automatically are crucial. You don't choose your thoughts. If you could choose your thoughts, you'd have to have them before you had them. These are just narratives that show up based on the predictions. Predictions, remember, are just about memories. The part of what generates the prediction is a memory. So it's this information that just automatically shows up given a situation. You don't have to buy into it. You can push back on it. And this feeds right into when we talk about things like procrastination. Why don't people engage in something that they want to engage in? They want to make changes. They want to do something. They want to start the project. They want to make that phone call, whatever it is, but they don't. Why? You have your answer now. It's because doing what is familiar is easier. It doesn't take anything out of the body budget. It keeps you in homeostasis. Remember, you're always taking action. Procrastination is still taking action. It's just not taking the action that you want in the direction that you want to go in. If you're procrastinating by taking actions of like making a phone call or starting a project or whatever it is, you're doing something. It's just not the thing that you should be doing. And this is what I encourage therapists and coaches to talk to their clients about, is that they are always taking action. Is it intentional action in the right direction? It's not just about taking action, it's about taking the right actions in the right direction, intentional action. This is why it's so important, and this is what we teach in the rate framework especially, but in cognitive response therapy, you kind of get the building blocks right, but the rate framework teaches you about the optimal life hierarchy and understanding how to define what success milestones look like for you. Success isn't a destination, it's a process, right? You're going to hit many success milestones on the journey of your life. But you learn how to break the big things down to small, actionable steps so you can always be directionally aligned towards something greater for yourself and for others. I will probably teach this in a future episode, but I teach about the 4 W's. The 4 W's are: what am I doing, why am I doing it, what to do next, and what it all means. Let's do that again. 4 W's. What am I doing, why am I doing it, what to do next, and what it all means. Why is this important? Because the more that you know what you're doing now, why you're doing it, what you're going to do next, and what it all means in a larger context of your life, you can face the challenge of change, but you always have a strong why to push through that resistance that you're feeling. To get to the other side of it, keep moving that line. And if you're a therapist or a coach out there, have this conversation with your clients. Help them to understand that as they walk through their life, they will feel the resistance, even in the resistance of engaging in the therapeutic journey or the coaching journey that they are paying you for. They're still resisting. It's because of the science that we're talking about here. And by the way, the last thing I want to talk about is crucially important. Not only do people face the resistance internally, but they face the resistance externally. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it for a minute. If everybody likes to stay in their familiar zones, that means that they like people around them to stay in their familiar zones, as they expect them to be. If somebody's acting unusually or abnormally, that actually throws people out of homeostasis. The predictions aren't correct. If somebody acts a certain way normally and then they act differently, it's a surprise to them, which throws them out of homeostasis. There's a resistance in there. Well, why is that relevant here? Well, as you change personally, or if you're a coach in a mental health professional, if your clients change, people around them will resist that change, even if it's for their betterment. So people that care about other people will give them a hard time about the changes that they make. Why? Well, because they are throwing them out of homeostasis. They're changing. Maybe they like them the way they were, or at least they're predictable. Or maybe they are forcing them to look at themselves in a way that they're not prepared to do or they don't want to look at. They're forced to look at themselves in a way that they're not prepared to. Maybe they start questioning, should I be making changes? I don't want to make changes. I want to stay in from my familiar zone. So I'm going to give them a hard time to say, knock it off, stay as you are. Why are you doing that therapy junk? Oh, coaching, haha, what a joke. There's nothing wrong with you. All these things that people might feel, like, I thought you wanted what's best for me. Why are you giving me a hard time? It's not a reflection on you as a person and your change or the journey that the person's on. It is a reflection of where that person is in their own lives and how they are feeling threatened by the other person's change. Calling these things out to your clients, or if you're an individual that's facing this in your own life, understand that this is natural. Be compassionate for yourself. Be compassionate to the other person. Understand that we all universally face this challenge of change. The unconscious is unrelenting in its pursuit to make sure that you stay in your familiar zone, the prediction stays accurate, that you stay in homeostasis, that you keep a full and healthy body budget. And anything, even if it's a good change, it's going to resist it. It's going to pull you away from that perceived threat and towards the familiar, towards safety. But I encourage you, lean up against it, push past it. Your limits are far beyond where you have imagined them to be. And learning in cognitive response therapy, learning how to influence and manage through these is absolutely crucial to living your optimal life. I'll be double clicking on some of these in future episodes as well. Of course, you can find more information over at elliottbarnett.com. And of course, the certifications are there. You can make sure that you engage in cognitive response therapy and the rate framework certifications. And if you have any questions, of course, I'm here to help. And we will probably cover a little bit more on the predictive model, which will really help you frame this up a little bit more to yourself as well as your clients, and really help to understand how to push past this resistance and the actions associated with it. But be kind to yourself. Understand that this is a universal challenge, and just remember that it is a perceived threat. The biggest takeaway I can give you today is to make sure that you lean up against that resistance. Do not buy into it. Your unconscious is always paying attention. It's always paying attention to the decisions that you make. If you give in, if you say, I'm going to turn away from that challenge, I'm going to back down, your unconscious will learn that that's who you are. You want to teach your unconscious that you are bigger and better than that it thinks you are. So keep pushing past that resistance mindfully. And remember, you don't have to get it right every time. As long as you consistently strive to push past that resistance and make those better decisions to move that line for yourself, your unconscious will eventually catch up and learn who you really not only are now, but who you really want to be. And the gap between who you are and who you want to be will get closer, will get smaller and smaller until you start living your optimal life. All right, until next time.